so good because when that baby comes,
Yeah.
all eyes on the baby,
Yeah.
keep the baby alive. That makes sense. Let's keep the baby alive. But we cannot be in that mode all the time.
Right.
Because then we're like, oh, the baby's 2, 5, 7, 10, and we're still all hands on deck just keeping the kid alive.
No.
And the kid doesn't need to be smothered with all that attention.
No.
It's not good for the child, right?
People get married and then they jump into the empty nest and they go, wait, we don't have anything in common. We put no energy into it. A lot of times the wife or the husband, in the case of Kathy and I, both of us, have what we call the empty nest syndrome.
What have you done for me lately?
Right.
Because if you go on with your life thinking, well, he hasn't done anything for me lately, she hasn't done anything for me lately, that is a losing war because they are never going to measure up and you're just going to find all these faults. But if instead you will turn that.
Welcome to HomeWord. I'm Jim Burns, and I am so happy you have tuned in or you're watching it on the YouTube channel. We've got a great show for you today. You know, a number of years ago, a woman who was working at HomeWord and actually worked with me came into my office and she was bubbling. And she lifted her left hand and she said, look at this. And it was an engagement ring. And I just gave her a big hug and I said, I'm so happy for you. And I'm so happy, you know, that you're marrying Mike because he's a great guy. And Mike is so fortunate and, you know, blessings to you. This is great. And all of a sudden she got really serious and she goes, I've been engaged for less than 24 hours. And I think you're the only one who is like super happy. People would say, congratulations. And then they'd say, marriage is really hard. And they'd have this look on their face. She said, including my parents. Well, marriage is hard. There are times when marriage is hard. But today we're going to talk about making marriage easier. My guest is Arlene Pellicane, and I love this woman, and I love what she has to say. Every time I'm with her, she is inspiring. She is fun. She has great practical truth, and she's just doing great stuff. And we're going to tell you all about her later, and we'll tell you about how to find more about her in the show notes. For Kathy and I, marriage isn't always easy. We have been married 50 years, 50, okay? That's a long time. I know, I'm old. And yet, when we first got married, both coming from dysfunctional families, we found out quickly that we had a high-maintenance marriage. We kind of weren't high-maintenance people, I don't think. Maybe that's, there was a movie when Harry met Sally and he said, you're high maintenance of the worst kind. You think you're low maintenance. So maybe that's Kathy and me. But our marriage has been high maintenance through the years, and we talk about that a lot. In fact, I'm in the middle of 5, yes, count them, 5 marriage conferences in 6 weeks. So, you know, I'm on the marriage roll right now. But we have a high maintenance marriage. But a quote that our guest gave in this book, Making Marriage Easier, by the way, if you're on the YouTube channel, here it is, beautiful book, and just came out, is this. You don't stumble upon a life filled with treasures. You build such a life. And, you know, that is, in my world, is circled now, and it's just embedded in my mind because I think that's what you do with marriage. Like I said, Arlene Pellicane, she is a podcaster. She is a speaker. She's an author, and just an all-around wonderful person. She's married to James. They've been married for over 25 years, and I think she was a child bride because she doesn't look like she could be married that long. And we're going to be talking about making marriage easier, and I think it can be done. No, I know it can be done, and even reading her book has given me a lot of good insight. We will talk about how to love and actually how to like each other, because that's a part of it, okay? Not just, do you love this person? Well, yeah, but do you like them too? Because it's possible to love and not sometimes like. And she's written several books. Parents Rising is a great parent book. She has written Screen Kids, which we've had her twice on the podcast here. One of our really top downloads is Screen Kids because she's such an expert on it. She wrote it with Gary Chapman, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. If you haven't checked out that podcast, go to our podcast and find that. And now this book, Making Marriage Easier. Like I said, she's been married to James for over 25 years. They live in San Diego. They've got 3 children. And welcome to the show.
So good to be back, Jim. Thanks so much.
Yeah, just anytime I'm with you, like I said, I'm inspired. You're awesome. So here we go. And I want to get right into it. Making Marriage Easier. I love the title of the book, but at the same time, you know, I'm in the middle of all these marriage conferences. I did one last week in North Carolina. I didn't have anybody come up to me and go, hey, by the way, marriage is easy.
It's super easy,
They say, in some ways, just the opposite. And you said in your book that you want to lighten our load and remind us that we can choose the path in the first place because we chose that path.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So the book is not titled Marriage is Easy, right? So it is, okay, marriage is work. It's hard. It takes struggle.
Yeah.
But how can we make it easier? And I hope that what the book will do is give us the mindset instead of having the mind of like, oh, this is so hard. Every day, such a battle. He's so difficult. She's so difficult. To think, wait a minute. How can I almost make this fun and turn it like, wait, what's one thing I could do today to make this easier?
Yeah.
And it's the idea of, if you make this decision, I'm going to go to the gym. But then, it's like, oh, I'm tired. It's dark out. I don't want to go.
Right.
But if I say I'm going to meet a friend there and we choose a time and we bet that if we don't show up together, we're going to owe each other coffee. And I choose my outfit and I put my shoes at the door. When I wake up, I realize, oh, I have to meet her at the, I exercise with my mom, actually. Awesome. So I have to actually exercise with my mother and she has to actually exercise with me.
That's hilarious.
And that has made it easier.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
So it's the same idea like with marriage. What can you pre-decide?
Yeah, it's good.
And what are these little habits you can do
to
make it like, oh, this is easier now?
Yeah, no, you're so right. I mean, I was speaking this past weekend, and I always ask people, are you willing to give your spouse 1% of your time in a week? And of course, sometimes I go, guys, put your hands up. You're going to win on this one. And then I'm asking them to actually 1% of a week is 90 minutes, and it's a date. But the interesting thing is that when people are proactive about it, when you know you're going to have a date. Last night, Kathy and I went to the movies. And sometimes we don't just do movies, we do other stuff too. But, we knew we were going to do it. I looked forward to it. She looked forward to it. We connected on a better way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of habit, And that doesn't sound all that romantic, but part of it is that way. And I mentioned a quote that I got in your book that I love, and I want to read it to you, and I want you to talk about it because I think you're right talking about that path as well. You don't stumble upon a life filled with treasures. You build such a life. And you weren't just talking about marriage there. You're talking about your life. Yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah. We live in this, quick kind of world. Like, let me just buy this thing, use this app, and I'm going to get this outcome.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
Right.
And so building a life, building a good marriage, it's interesting. I had someone ask me actually on an interview, well, what's the advantage of marriage versus like cohabiting?
Right.
It was a secular podcast and we were talking about this. And my husband, when we were talking about this question, he said, it's like owning property or renting.
It's great.
And that no one forces you, because the interviewer was like, isn't it like you're being forced to get married?
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to get married.
Right.
But it's like no one forces you to buy a home. No one forces you to own that. But if you will put in the effort and you will do it, then later when your mortgage is paid off, you have this house and you live in it and you put in the work and now you get to enjoy it.
Oh, you put much more energy into a home that you own
yes.
than I love that analogy.
So it's such a good analogy of we are building and it takes maybe some time and some effort, but the freedom you get from having that stability and that beauty is so good.
Well, and I'm just going to go off for a second, I'm kind of doing the random thing on cohabitation because you're so right on that because all studies show, these are secular studies, that women it's kind of for them pre-marriage. For some guys, it's not. It's not just for the physical act, but it's also for they're trying to save money. They're trying to do this and that. But secular studies show less marital satisfaction when they get married.
Yeah.
A greater chance for adultery, and also a greater chance for divorce. And so again, I think part of that is what you're saying. So if you're going to own this thing, you got to put some energy into it.
Yeah.
And we were walking our yard the other day, and Kathy goes, "We need at least a day." Right? Well, if I was renting our house, I wouldn't
Who
care.
cares?
Yeah, I thought it was okay how it is, but she wanted to put some time and energy into it. I love that. Okay, this is a random question, but here's the question. Do you like backpacking? Yes, no? Well, tell me the story.
The short answer is no. The long answer is okay.
Yeah.
Once my whole family gets their backpacks, yes, I don't want to miss it and I want to be a part. So my husband, James, is way more physically active than I am from day one, right, of getting married over 25 years ago. So we're planning this big backpacking trip, in the Inyo National Forest, and you go in and it's beautiful and you have 25 pounds on your back and you're just going, and all that stuff, and you go to the bathroom in the wild, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I had done this 1 year already and knew how hard it was. And I remember that year that I said to my husband on day 2, if I could pay someone $1,000 to airlift me out of this spot, I literally would pay the $1,000. Please get me out of here.
Yeah.
So I had that experience. My husband promised me that it would not be quite as hard, which was true. It was not as hard, but it was still hard. So I said yes. And with every step, when it was like either level or like really pretty scenery, I was like, oh, thank God I didn't miss this. This is beautiful. Like, I love this. This is crazy. It's amazing. Look, this lake with these mountains around it, so pristine. No one is out there but the 5 of you, your family. Like, it's crazy. It's beautiful. But then when it's like, it's going up, or we hit the snow patch and we can't cross it, and then we must find another way, and all these things, I'm vowing, like, why did I say yes? I have already done this before. I should have definitely said no. And I will say, when they ask me for trip 3, I'm probably 50-50 on what I'll do. But what I thought was, this is like marriage. Like, when it's easy, you're like, yay, I love this.
I know.
But when it's like, oh, financial difficulties, we're arguing about the kids, like, you don't even seem to like me, you haven't talked to me, we haven't really connected in days, then you just feel like, what are we doing here? Like, am I in the right spot? Maybe I shouldn't do this. And just like you have, when I looked at the trail map, you see the little dots and things. You can kind of picture, okay, I'm going to have to go 3 miles this day or whatever. But until you're there, you do not know. And
you didn't know 3 miles were straight up.
Yeah, you didn't know.
And you had to go to the bathroom in the snow patch or whatever. Yeah. Right.
But you have to stay on the path.
Yeah, it's really good.
And you have to take it to completion because there's no quitting. Like, you cannot stop and just be like, I have to stop. You have to get to the end. And it's the same like marriage.
When you're done,
you made
great.
the commitment. I'm going to keep at this road even when it's not
Exactly.
great.
Exactly. And so when you're done, not that in marriage, I mean, well, you do get done if somebody passes, but you're at the peak and you go, this is awesome. That moment. Sometimes you have to go, you know what? It was worth the effort, but there's going to be effort, and you got to be able to.
I think you can attest after 50 years, and I can attest after 25 years. It gets easier the longer you're married. You kind of understand each other better. The same things that maybe it would derail you for 2 days. Now it's like 10 minutes, and you're like, you have it sorted out. These things do get easy.
No, my big phrase is, does it really matter? So Kathy's and I are very different, and she's late to church, and it just drives me nuts. 50 years, and I'm saying this on the podcast, and she listens to the podcast, but she knows it. And yet now at this point, I just kind of go, well, you know what? So I'm going to miss the first strum of the guitar for our worship service because we didn't make it, and she's complaining that the parking isn't working right. But if we would have gone a few minutes earlier, but you know what? It doesn't matter. And I honestly, I don't. Where I cared at one time, I cared. That was a battle. Okay? I can remember calling her selfish and doing all these things as we're arguing on the way to church so we could, be closer to God. Right? But years, I kind of did that in my head, and I don't anymore. I think it's that analogy is a great analogy of, no, we choose the path, and we can make something of our life that way. I love that. So you and James made 4 decisions in your marriage, and I love the decisions. Honestly, the book Making Marriage Easier has these 4 decisions in it, and it would be something I was telling you earlier. I would just hand this to people. But the first decision is play by the rules, and I want you to unpack that. But also, while you're unpacking it, talk about the power hour.
Play by the rules is there are rules to marriage. There are rules of engagement. And there are rules to play. And if you don't mind the rules, you get a bad result. So just think it's not a game like me against my spouse. It's a game like, hey, this is a fun game called marriage, and we're supposed to play as long as we can. So let's keep it going. So there are things you pre-decide in your marriage.
So good. Okay.
There are things like, I'm going to be faithful to you only. Right? I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to berate you in front of others, whatever your rules are. But there are things that you pre-decide.
So good.
This is what we will and won't do, and we won't follow our feelings. Because our feelings will be like, oh, forget it. I made the vow 20 years ago, but things are different now. No, you made the vow 20 years ago for better or for worse. So let's keep this vow and let's play by these rules. So one of our rules is the power hour, and all that is every day we will plan to have a meal together.
So good.
The power hour.
Right.
It's not something we wrote down like we must, but we talk about it like, hey, let's eat dinner. Like as newlyweds, let's have dinner together and make that part of our normal rhythm.
Right.
So much so that we never had to talk about it ever again because it felt weird if we weren't having dinner together.
Sure.
So obviously if you're out of town, if a friend has a birthday, this is not like, oh, I can't eat with you. I must have my power hour. No. Right. But for the most part, you're having a meal with your spouse.
No.
Now, if you can't have dinner, then it could be coffee in the morning, or it might be, like, hey, we're real busy right now, so hey, why don't I take you out to lunch? And is that inconvenient? Sure, but at least we can connect. Sure. So there's going to be times in your life that doesn't work. But, I talk to people now and they're like, we don't eat together.
Right.
Like we just kind of do the activities.
Right.
Everyone gets their own food and you just kind of do that. Yeah. And so the fact of you sitting across the table, whether it's at home or out with your spouse, with your kids if you have them, that's the power hour. It'll keep you together.
It's so good. And I love that illustration. And I love the whole illustration. In fact, I wrote a book called Getting Ready for Marriage. And if I was going to write that book again, I would use that illustration where pre-decide certain things.
Yes.
And it's really the basics.
Yes.
What I saw in your book on that when you were talking about that part of it, I went, it was that great theologian Vince Lombardi who said, when you stray away from the basics, you've gone a long ways toward defeat. He was talking about football.
Right.
But the basics of marriage is have a meal together. My goodness, that's how you connect.
Because you're going to be hungry.
Yeah.
You have to eat.
Right.
So there's that. And then imagine day after day after day you don't eat together ever. Then no wonder you feel disconnected because you're not spending time together.
Yeah. And so people will pre-decide something and then the baby comes.
Yes.
And now we make three. I think your chapter said we make three. So the baby shows up and kind of totally, I was speaking to a bunch of women yesterday. I'm going to do it to another group tomorrow. And they were young. Most of them had young kids. And I just went, your life is chaos. I get it. But in the middle of that, they still need to make that decision. So how do you keep from having a child-focused marriage?
Yeah, it's so good because when that baby comes, all eyes on the baby, keep the baby alive. That makes sense. Let's keep the baby alive. But we cannot be in that mode all the time.
Right.
Because then we're like, oh, the baby's 2, 5, 7, 10. And we're still all hands on deck just keeping the kid alive. No. And the kid doesn't need to be smothered with all that attention.
No.
It's not good for the child, right?
Right.
So shifting from that child-centered when they're a baby, shifting to like, no, okay, the child is a part of our home.
So good.
But we don't orbit around for us baby Ethan or baby Noel or baby Lucy.
Right.
But instead, if we will honor the marriage, if we will go on date night, if we will ask, so for instance, if a child has an activity, right? So Lucy, she's going to play tennis. So what do we do as parents, especially mothers? We will rearrange our whole life around the tennis schedule. Like we will do it. Like you want me to sit in the car for an hour, have to wait for you because you have late practice, I will do it.
Sure.
We'll do all these things. But will we ask, like, for instance, okay, we're thinking about tennis. How is this going to impact our marriage?
Very good.
How is this going to impact how available we are to each other? How will this be for the entire family? Right? And so just kind of thinking through those things and even thinking like for your marriage, would I wait in an hour happily for my husband if he was late? I'd be like, do you know I've been waiting for an hour, but your kid makes you wait. You're like, oh, okay, I understand. You had to talk to your teacher.
So good.
So just kind of think. Like, am I treating my spouse with the same kind of bend over backwards care that I give to my child?
Right.
And just make sure we're not losing the marriage in the mix.
And that is a key point. I would say over half the people who are listening to this podcast right now have more of a child focus. And I get it. Yeah. Children, it's not like if you had a 4-year-old, you can't go, hey, we're going to go away for the weekend. There's peanut butter in the cupboard. You're going to be fine. No, you don't do that, of course. You talked about even safety. But if we continue to do that, we have kids who think that all of their life, that the parent's life revolves around them, and they don't even get the model of a healthy marriage. So I
and
love
then you wonder why kids grow up and they're like, I don't want to get married.
No,
that doesn't look like a lot of fun.
I love that. I love you had a chapter and it just cracks me. I literally circled it and I love this chapter. I don't know if you're going to know which one I'm going to say, but the chapter is called "But We Had Sex Last Tuesday."
That's the one I thought you might say.
And I just go, that is the best phrase. Now, it may not be, Elijah, who's in the studio with us. Yeah. He's a young married.
That's
so
right.
That may not be their phrase. I was telling him this because I told him this before you came in. But that's a great phrase. So how do you keep physical intimacy alive? in the midst of a busy life.
Yeah. I know. Isn't it funny? Because that's how I think. But honey, we already did this on Tuesday. Why are we having this conversation now?
Right.
I remember a counselor telling me couples who have kids who don't schedule sex do not have sex.
Right.
And it helped us early in our marriage to realize, we need to schedule this.
Yeah.
And my husband would tell me, well, this is great that you're writing books and that you travel to speak and you do this podcast, but can we make sure that you still have time and energy for physical intimacy? Right. And so this is a huge thing for couples. Sure. And I know sometimes it's the man who has the different desire or the woman who has the different desire.
Libidos.
But typically something is different, right? You're not on the exact same page.
Right.
So Shanti Feldhahn, I had interviewed her on my podcast, and she really helped me to understand like initiating desire and receptive desire. So talking about like the one who wants it more, they're initiating. They're like, come on.
Yeah.
And then the receptive isn't thinking about it all the time, but then when invited into intimacy, it's like, okay, this is great. No. I can do this. No. And once I realized, because my husband would be like, why don't you want to do this more? Like, it makes me feel unloved, right? Why don't you want me anymore, baby?
Right.
And then when you realize, it kind of made him sad, like, oh, you're receptive. Right. That's why you're not always thinking, oh, let's do it. You're thinking, okay, this sounds, I want to do this.
Yeah.
So kind of understanding those styles, the approach, that was helpful.
That's so helpful.
And then when you're able to talk about it, because a lot of times, you're listening and you're like, I'm even embarrassed a little bit, right? Us talking about it.
Sure.
It's a sensitive topic. And in your marriage, sometimes it's like, well, we can't talk about that because it'll turn into a fight or someone's going to feel unloved or rejected. It's going to be bad. So step one is let's get to the point where we can talk about this and be perhaps less defensive and more open.
Yeah.
And then let's get those small wins of, okay, let's realize this is important and what can we do to make this
I mean, you could do a whole session on
better for both.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a whole session on that. Because, and it's so good what you had to say. And
don't lose this just because you have kids.
No.
And I will say, like, when your kids are little, that's when you're like all embarrassed, right? But that's when you should be like, hey, this is the go signal because they have no idea what you're doing, right? And when they're teenagers, it's more like, well, this is really embarrassing. Right. What in the world are we supposed to do?
No, exactly. No, great input. Arlene Pellicane with us today. We're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about her book. And the topic today is called Making Marriage Easier. Just such a good read, too. And so, again, I'm putting it up here for you to take a look at it if you're on the YouTube channel. I suggest you get it. I read the book. I loved the book. And how you can find out more about Arlene and all that she does is go to our show notes or also go to arlenepellicane.com. If you're trying to figure out how to spell her name, you can go to our show notes and there it is. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Hi, everybody. Jim Burns here. And I wanted to invite you to HomeWord's Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. If you're in Southern California or you can get to Southern California, it has been a couple years since we've been in SoCal. But it's a great conference. We have Doug Fields, who is, I think, the premier speaker on marriage. Incredible content, plus he's hilarious. Lucille Williams, who's written a couple books on intimacy, as well as a premarital book. She's amazing, and she's also one of the speakers, and then yours truly. And it's actually one of the most fun conferences I do all year, and actually one of the most inspiring. So it's really, really cool. So I want to invite you. All the information is in our show notes for this day with the Rosbergs, and also then next week you can, in the next podcast, we'll have information on it as well. I'm in the middle of this. If you're getting this right at the beginning of us dropping this podcast, I'm on my way to Rice Lake, Wisconsin for this weekend, marriage conference. Austin, Texas the following week, marriage conference. And then the next week is Rome, Georgia at Windshape, which is the premier conference center and with marriages. It's amazing. So I'm in the marriage mode today. And I hope you'll join us at the Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. It's just really a great time. Welcome back. What a great conversation today as we're talking with Arlene Pellicane about making marriage easier. And we didn't say marriage is easy. We said making marriage easier, and you do that by decisions that you make. And I want to go to decision number 2. I love this decision. It's actually a part of my life work, is give thanks every day. Mm-hmm. Speak about that.
It's this attitude of gratitude. And I know it sounds like you've heard that a million times, but if you will say, God, I give thanks to you for my spouse.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going through the day and I'm looking for a way to be thankful. I'm thankful I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for these dishes because it means that I'm with someone. You're just looking for ways to give thanks, because the opposite is, right, you're ungrateful.
Yeah, you're talking about complaining.
You're complaining, and you don't appreciate what you have.
Right.
And according to Scripture, God doesn't like that very much.
Yeah.
You see him continually having the children of Israel give thanks.
Exactly.
That's a core.
Sure, and they did some grumbling. And he would say, And the Bible even says in Philippians, I think it's 2:14, do all things without grumbling and complaining. Yeah. So that doesn't mean that we don't say, oh, I don't like the snow today because it's cold and it's been snowing for months or something wherever you live. Not here in Southern California, but we do have to be careful at that. And I call it thank therapy. And I find there was a time in my life with Kathy, I was just really frustrated with her because she told me I had a double chin. I was like, now everybody's going to move to the YouTube channel to go, does Jim have a double chin? And I was so mad at her. We just had we were speaking at in Mount Hermon, a Christian conference center up north, and then we're coming down, went to Carmel, stayed there for a night. It was all romantic. We're driving down the one highway, which you would know, a lot of people not. It's the most beautiful highway I've ever been on. And she says, I think you're getting a double chin. And so I don't hear God speak to me. But a little later, when I was so mad at her, I didn't say anything. I just stuffed. I heard God say, practice what you've been learning. Practice, for me, thank therapy. Yeah. And so I said, with gritted teeth, thank you that Kathy, and I had a good time. We're not having one right now, but thank you for the amazing wife she is. Thank you for the amazing mother that she is. Thank you for all that she gives up in my life and whatnot. Yep. And I found myself so happy. My circumstance had not changed. Yes. I was still kind of frustrated with her for saying it. So she hadn't said anything, and she's in the middle of it. She's like, "Oh, I'm just doing it quietly." And she's going, "Oh, look at how beautiful the ocean is, and look at this and that." And I just pulled her toward me. I'm not sure you should do this when you're driving. And I just gave her a kiss. And I said, I really am thankful for you. And she goes, oh, I thought you were mad at me for saying you had a double chin. I go, we'll talk about that. But the interesting part was your circumstance may not change, but your attitude can. And that's what happens in marriage. Yes. That's what I heard and what I read when you were talking about that. So decision number 2 is give thanks every day. Decision number 3 is serve your spouse. Now, that's not always popular, especially today. And yet Kathy and I have a goal in our marriage. It's 9 words. It's actually out of Ephesians 5:21, and it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And the word submit really means to serve. Yeah. That's not easy, but what you're saying is, no, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's decision number 3.
And it may not be popular, but but it's in the Bible that you say, okay, Jesus came to seek and serve, and he came to save us. And if the God of all glory can come and be a servant. Right. You think in business, you hear a lot about servant leadership. Right. But then when it's that you serve your spouse, says, oh, no, wait, I don't want to do that because then I'm going to get walked all over and I'm going to be the doormat. And obviously this is not, I hope, as you're listening to Jim and I, we're not talking about that we want you to be abused, that we want you to just be quiet about it. No, that is not service. Service is the attitude instead of wondering, well, what have you done for me lately? Right. Because if you go on with your life thinking, well, he hasn't done anything for me lately, she hasn't done anything for me lately, that is a losing war because they are never going to measure up and you're just going to find all these faults. But if instead you will turn that and say, well, what can I do for you today? Right. And you're probably listening like, no, wait, that is the question that I always ask, but my spouse does not, return in kind. Sure. But it is still that attitude of just something small, like, hey, honey, is there anything I can do to make your day easier? Yeah. Can you imagine just asking such a small question? Sure. And your spouse is probably not going to say, I'd like you to paint the, they're going to answer with something pretty like, give me a hug or, I'd love to schedule like a date, like it could be something so simple. So just asking that question, how can I help you today? Yep. What can I do to make your life easier? Yeah. And it's that attitude of, I'm here to help you. Yeah, I love that, Arlene. It's kindness matters. Yeah. So sometimes it's even before you, ask them, you kind of go, what act of service can I do for my spouse today? Yes. And it's simple. And sometimes they notice, and then sometimes they always don't. I have a funny story about that. My wife on December 19th had back surgery and kind of major. So she can't lift. She's still, it's been a while now, but she can't lift over 10 pounds. And so I became her, her servant, believe me. Groceries. And then she got the flu on Christmas, and then she got pneumonia. And, my goodness, poor Kathy. So I had said to my wife, or said to my friend Gary, who's one of my favorite
people in the world. I go, it's kind of an honor to do this because Kathy's a lot better at this. It comes naturally for Kathy. It doesn't come as naturally for me. And I go, it's kind of an honor. So a month later, he's like, hey, how's it going with you honoring? I just love that you said that. I go, well, the honoring's getting a little hard right now because I still have to go pick up stuff. And she's saying, I can't carry that. We had the carpet cleaned and and we had to put everything up on beds. And I had to do all the heavy lifting, which I should have. Not even heavy. She can't do 10 pounds.
Right.
And I said, so the honoring's getting a little harder. And he goes, well, good. That's realistic. Because when you said it's an honor to serve her, I was like, I'm not like that all the time. But it is. It really, when I serve Kathy and do something like that, I've got two things. I did it this morning. I make the coffee in the morning because I get up way earlier than she does. And she gets up early, but I get up way early.
Yeah.
Freako, weird early. And then also, she always likes the blinds up. So I go and do the blinds. Well, that takes me a whopping, 4 minutes.
Yeah.
But it better be that way. And she never has said anything like, oh, you got to go do the blinds. But I know that she kind of appreciates it. So that's the kind of thing you do.
Yes.
Yeah. Not that I'm putting myself up because she does that all the time. But yeah. So I think that serving thing is absolutely key. Now, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I love your fourth decision. And it's to take fun seriously. I love the phrase. It's a phrase I use a lot, have serious fun. And I want you to impact that for our listeners, because this is really good, practical stuff. Have fun.
This is so you, Jim, having fun, because the fun is what brought you together.
Yeah, right.
And that what ends up happening is we think, well, that's like not a necessity.
Yeah.
So we'll have fun later.
Yeah.
Like we'll pay the bills now, we'll go to the activities, we'll do the things, and we'll have fun later.
Yeah.
But then later, it's too late, because then you realize, well, why are we together? Because we don't have fun anymore.
Right.
So we are all about, the Pellicane family is all about weaving the fun in, having more laughter. And so put it in your regular crazy thing. So my husband, very out of the box. So when my kids were little, he was like, let's put them in martial arts. Great. So he would tour all the studios. Then he came back. I found the one, Blue Dragon. And guess what? If we enroll the 3, they'll have the parents can go for free. So you and I can go too. Okay, what wife wants to be told you are going to join 3 times a week your children on a mat to wrestle and punch people, right?
Yeah.
But we're fun. We
fun.
are a fun family.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? That sounds hilarious. And we literally all wore these Blue Dragon t-shirts and piled when they were in elementary school. We went to Blue Dragon, and the first time my husband put my head in the triangle, I was like, you have got to be kidding. There is no way. But we would do the sparring, and you wear like a big dot on your chest. And I was like, do not even think of hitting me. And he's like, this is the whole point. You have a dot on your chest that I'm supposed to hit. So the whole thing, it was just fodder for fun.
Perfect.
It was just every week.
Yeah.
We were having, and to this day, like we still play ultimate frisbee in the park. It was a COVID thing from 2020 to get out.
Yay.
And every Sunday, we still go out in the park and play ultimate frisbee. So you just kind of have to work in the fun in everyday life.
I love that. I said, we are almost done, but I've got to ask one more question, because at the end of your book, you talked about the golden years. You've been married for 25 years. Yeah. And yet you said, we need to be preparing for the golden years. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I'm in my 50s now, and you think, wow, the kids, and I've got, our youngest is a sophomore in high school. Yeah. So in 2 years, we could be empty nesters, So it's like, wait a minute, we've got to prepare that we will be in a rhythm of, it's not weird, just the two of us. Right. Yeah. So that means we like each other. We do things together. We stay interested in each other, stay connected to church. So, if you've gotten out of the habit of going to church physically, get back in the habit of going physically. Because in your golden years, you're going to need that community and you're going to need like things to do. So start doing activities together that you enjoy, so you can keep doing those when you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s.
I love that you said that, because in reality, we have our kids for 2 decades. Yeah. I mean, obviously we have them longer. We have them all of our life. But we're day-to-day parents for 2 decades, say. We're going to be in the empty nest most of the time longer. You're going to be in the empty nest longer than any. It's hardly it's unimaginable, even having a high school one still. But you are. And so what happens is people get married, and then they jump into the empty nest and they go, wait, we don't have anything in common. We put no energy into it. A lot of times the wife or the husband, in the case of Kathy and I, both of us, have what we call the empty nest syndrome, where, like with Kathy, she was the sun. she had 3 daughters. We have 3 daughters. So our 3 girls were, rotating around the sun. I'm rotating around the sun too. And all of a sudden she's not needed because at least for the 3 daughters, they're all gone. And she had to go through almost a identity issue, but it was because we didn't prepare for that. And so we had to reinvent our life.
Yes.
And it didn't mean that we were going away from our kids. It just simply meant that we had to. And it's the things you said. It's the simple things. Joining a Bible study, getting involved in church if they're not, playing tennis together, doing whatever it is, but putting some of that extra time that you have, because you do, into each other, as opposed to just getting busy and becoming even more separate. So great input. Listen, great conversation today, Arlene. Always great to have you. Great conversation. And I want to make sure that our listeners hear what you're doing. I know they can go to the website, arlenepellicane.com. It's all in the show notes. But tell us a little bit about what you're doing. I even know you have a conference coming up.
Yes.
So talk to us about that.
Yes, we have the Parents Rising Conference coming in San Diego, September 6th. So you can go to the parentsrisingconference.com.
Okay.
And Sissy Goff and David Thomas are going to be there. And we're basically wanting parents not to feel like victims, like, oh, I'm helpless, but to rise up to be the leaders. And then you can find out more about the book at makingmarriageeasier.com.
Great.
And there's extra free resources for you.
Okay. And if they go to arlenepellicane.com, they can kind of find all that stuff too. That's cool. And by the way, that conference, everybody, sounds amazing. It that for one thing, you get, Arlene, all Arlene there, but you also, David and Sissy are amazing. I was just on their podcast yesterday, and they are trusted voices in the world of parenting and worth you making the time. Plus, hey, you're going to San Diego, right?
That's
so it's coming your way. So
good.
Sandy, if you're not, most of you who listen to this or watch this, you're not living near San Diego. And if you want to get away, it's September.
6th.
Some of my favorite, that's one of my favorite months here in Orange County, which is next to San Diego. And in San Diego, September is a great time. So it's September 6th. You can get more information. Go experience that. You know what? It may be something just like this conversation here that can kind of heighten your awareness of how to be a more effective mom, to be a more effective dad. Take a vacation, go for a few days, and then go do something else. Connect with each other. Also, when you do those things, those are usually from things like that. You'll say, "Wow, why don't we keep doing this on, and we'll, you come up with some goals and stuff." So super good. Yes, you can make your marriage easier. It's not going to happen by circumstance and chance. You got to lean into this. A good marriage doesn't happen. You make a good marriage happen. And that's the kind of theme that runs throughout the book, Making Marriage Easier, as well. But yeah, it takes discipline. This doesn't sound very romantic, but it takes discipline and it takes some perseverance. And it does take some work. So do it. It's worth it. There's nobody who has put energy into their marriage who would say, it's not worth it. And again, one person probably relates to this more than the other. Sometimes, a wife is saying, oh my gosh, my husband needs to, well, you know what? Sit down, listen to this podcast or watch the podcast with your husband or do it in bits. Turn it on while you're driving in the car. You got to go pick up the kids. It's 15 minutes away. Start and then, have that kind of dialogue. So good to be with you.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Hey, let me also say before we go that those 4 decisions, I want to make sure you get those. Play by the rules. So good. Give thanks every day, serve your spouse, and take fun seriously. By the way, those 4 things, you can do that. This is not complicated. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. So lean into that and you're going to see changes. So the conversation we've had has been so good. And by the way, if you are in Southern California, and sometimes people even fly into this, HomeWord we're back in Southern Cal. We haven't done it for a couple of years. We've done it other places. Last one was Minnesota, -14 below. But we do a Refreshing Your Marriage conference. Doug Fields, my good buddy, is, I think, the best communicator right now on marriage, period. I know that offends some of my friends it doesn't offend them. They all agree with me probably, who do marriage ministry. But Doug Fields, he's hilarious. You will laugh your head off. And then we also have Lucille Williams, who's written a couple books on marriage, does a great job. We're bringing her in from Phoenix for the conference on March 14th and 15th. You can get all that information it's also in our show notes. And so you may want to come to that. So, it's coming right up from when this podcast is going to air, but we want to invite you to that. And if you can't come, then you could go to the HomeWord.com website. We have courses on marriage. And, I just find sometimes instead of going to a conference, you and your spouse watch a course together, read a book together. I tell people always, read a marriage book a year, read a parenting book a year. This might be your book for the year. For one thing, look at that. It's thin. I like that. Guy, I don't want a big, thick book. I want a thin book. And yet this is packed with good stuff. So anyway, great day today. Thank you for listening. It's an honor. I realize you come from all over the world. I realize that you take valuable time to hear this podcast, to watch this podcast, and truly it is an honor. And I thank you for that. I want to thank again Arlene. And for now, I'm Jim Burns, and you're listening to HomeWord.